American Sign Language, also known as ASL, is a visual gesture language, and it's used for communication by and with deaf people in the United States and parts of Canada. It is claimed to be the third most commonly used language in the United States, and is expressed through movements of the hands, body, and facial expressions. So an example of this would be an ASL user asking a question, and it would look something like this. In ASL, that translates to, "What is your name?" And as you could see, my eyebrows were lowered and my eyes weren't as wide. They were lower, squintier. There are also advantages and disadvantages of ASL. A couple advantages would be how you're able to communicate with people who are deaf and hard of hearing. So that means that gives you access to communicate with 17% of the population in the United States. So that's 17% more people you can communicate with ASL than you could before. And another advantage would be how ASL makes a huge impact on children with disabilities. Children with autism especially, they are able to express their wants and needs through ASL. So it's not so frustrating for them to not be able to tell you what they want or how they're feeling. They're able to do that by learning ASL at a young age, so then when they get older, it becomes easier for them. A disadvantage of ASL would be it is a hands-on language. So if you don't have full use of your hands, this may be difficult for somebody because it is all hands, and they wouldn't be able to communicate with people who are deaf or hard of hearing, so they would have to have a translator there at all times if they wanted to talk to somebody that was deaf or hard of hearing. Other than that, those are the advantages and disadvantages of ASL.
American Sign Language, or ASL, is the predominant method of communication for the deaf and hard of hearing persons. However, there are two other modalities of communication that incorporate the English language and American Sign Language. These include Signed Exact English, or C, and Pidgin Signed English, or PSE. There are advantages and disadvantages to both the sign systems. Signing Exact English, or C, is a sign system that matches signs with the English language. It also shares the same grammar and syntax as English too. In fact, it matches the English translation word for word. Pidgin Signed English, or PSE, however, is a combination of English and American Sign Language. Both C and PSE have various advantages that benefit people who became deaf later on in life or already knew English. C and PSE are also advantageous to the intellectually delayed and disabled persons. Educational systems utilize C to aid young adolescents in learning English. An advantage children experience is that C uses English grammar, and it gives them the same opportunities as hearing children. PSE is used more often by primary English speakers. One might think the obvious advantage is that C and PSE allow deaf and non-deaf people to communicate more readily. However, according to LifePrint, the deaf community is often offended by the use of C and PSE. If a child is born deaf, the best possible option is to take up ASL, since the child has no prior knowledge of the English language.
So another communication approach for people who are deaf and or hard of hearing is the oralism method. The oralism method involves teaching deaf or hard of hearing children to speak orally, as a person with normal hearing would speak. So the whole aim of oralism is to improve the intelligibility of speech, which is basically just how well the person can be understood. And it also helps provide them a way to communicate with their families and with the hearing community. So that is one of the advantages of oralism. There's a lot of people in the hearing community. There's a vast amount of people with normal hearing. And so it's a significant skill because the majority of hearing impaired children are born to hearing parents. so it also helps them communicate easier with their family. Another advantage of oralism is that the use of spoken language can also help promote the development of basic literacy skills. A disadvantage of oralism is the negative stigma surrounding it. So the oralism approach in the past used to be pretty intense and tedious, and it also tended to be forced upon deaf people. So that wasn't good. And it's also intense and tedious, like the whole intervention process, because it becomes difficult to teach phoneme production to those who can't hear. Many of our phonemes look visually the same, but are produced differently. So that can be difficult to teach. And the last disadvantage of oralism is that it is not accepted among the deaf community.
Cued speech is a visual mode of communication that is utilized to demonstrate differences between sounds in a given language. In English, there are 8 different hand shapes to depict consonant sounds in 4 different locations on the face, along with movements between those locations to demonstrate vowel sounds. This mode of communication is utilized to assist deaf and hard of hearing individuals with lip reading a spoken language. The main advantage is that it allows for 100% accuracy in lip reading, which is a huge jump from 30% accuracy given standard oralism. Furthermore, it allows for better lexical and linguistic understanding. This makes sense because it allows for deaf and hard of hearing individuals to process all of the information rather than just chunks. I would like to do a quick activity to demonstrate what I mean by this. Consider the sounds p, b, and m. They are classified as bilabials, which means that they are produced with the lips shut. To deaf persons, these sounds appear exactly the same. How are they supposed to differentiate? Context clues? Maybe. But is that always accurate? Not necessarily. I want you to try and tell me what word I'm saying. Did I say pop, bob, or mom? It's impossible to tell the difference with just lip reading. By the way, I said pop. This is where cued speech comes into play. This is the signal for P, this is the signal for B, and this is the signal for M. And this is the vowel location for the ah sound. Now try and guess what word I am saying. Did you get it? Now you can see why cued speech is so helpful. I said mom. Although cued speech allows for some amazing benefits, it also has some taunting disadvantages. First, only 8% of the deaf community utilizes it. That is, 0.4% of the U.S. population knows cued speech. With this limited population, communication is limited to a small number of people. Furthermore, it requires advanced phonemic awareness skills, which is difficult for most hearing individuals, let alone persons that can't hear the sounds of a given language. Therefore, it requires tedious effort to learn cued speech. Overall, cued speech is worth careful consideration, for it has some amazing benefits, but it also has some prominent faults as well.